In this dollar store craft, I really wanted to bring you guys something a little bit different. Instead of kit bashing a custom miniature from things I found at the dollar store, I wanted to make a magnetic version of the Professor Dungeon Master's Ultimate Dungeon Terrain. I'm a DM who loves using terrain, and I've used the Professor Dungeon Master system before, and I really enjoyed it. Sometimes less can honestly be more. And the beauty of the Professor Dungeon Master system is just how easy it is to make, how light, how durable it is. It's almost indestructible even. Honestly, you can do so much with something like this. It gets you to the heart of the action and really does offer a unique gaming experience that I think is really awesome. And while I kind of failed at making the system magnetic, I do think it's still worthy of sharing with you. So with all that being said, I'm going to show you how I made it and why I feel like I missed the mark on this craft. Now let's jump in. Starting off with the materials, you can honestly find everything you need at the dollar store. I bought a pizza pan to be my magnetic base and a sheet of dollar store foam core. You can also find tacky glue and Mod Podge and even paint here. Beginning the craft, I started by placing an inner layer of foam core in the pizza pan. I didn't choose to do this in any measured way. I just traced the outline of the pan and then worked the edges until it sat flush on the bottom. If I was going to do this again, I'd actually measure out a 12-inch circle, however. But after I finally worked the foam core and got it to where I wanted it, I just roughed up the surface of the pan with a sanding brick. You can also find these at my local dollar store, but I had it already so I didn't buy it. And then used tacky glue to put down the first layer. So I know that the Professor Dungeon Master actually uses a circle to denote his zones, but looking on the Tabletop Crafters Guild, which I suggest any of you guys out there that are crafting to join, I found a crafter who actually made a version of it using a hex pattern. And I just thought that it was more interesting and looked really cool. I couldn't find the old post, otherwise I'd shout you out directly, but thanks for being an unsung hero. And if you want to mimic this design, you can find a stencil to this 6-inch hex down below. After cutting out 6 of these hexes, I had nearly completely used the entire sheet of foam core in this project. Then I went on to place my first hex in the center, and I wanted that to dry first because I was going to use that placement to guide where I was going to place all the outer hexes. But before I placed the outer hexes, I decided to go ahead and texture the center one first. And I did that by tracing a coffee stir stick, but you could easily measure a 1/4 inch instead. Then I went over that one last time with my hot knife, and I know I used the hot knife for all the cutting on this craft, but a sharp knife would work just as easily. When adding the outer hexes, it was easiest to peel off all the paper from both sides, and then press the foam core down, and the edge of the pizza pan itself will create an indent where you need to cut along. And after all those are cut out, I'll add tacky glue and press them down into place. After the glue was dry, I went ahead and hand drew a tile pattern in the outer hexes. It's important not to overthink this part. All you're really trying to do here is make random, jagged, box-like shapes. Unlike with the center hex, I chose not to go over all the lines again with the hot knife. I did this mostly because the outer rim has this small gap in between, and I did not want any of the outer rim tiles to maybe flake off or not properly be glued down. It wasn't until I got to this stage in the craft where I really decided to test how well the magnets were going to grab to the pan through the foam core. And I learned that it wasn't very well, if at all. The reason I ended up making this mistake is because I had used one of my larger magnets that I made my rails out of initially to do the testing, and it actually does have enough grab through the foam core to connect with the pan. But obviously, a smaller magnet means less grab, and so anything smaller than one of these magnets actually doesn't seem to have enough strength to reach the pan through both layers of foam core. And in hindsight, I feel like I should have realized that, but ultimately, I decided to move on, even if it was a bit disappointing. So I finished the texture on the stonework just using an aluminum ball, and then got to painting. Starting with the center hex, I chose to use my dark wood tone, which is a base coat in chocolate brown. But after I had done this base coat on the center hex, I couldn't help but think to myself, the outer rim would look a lot better if it was in black. Having already decided to cheat on the dollar store and not use any paints that came from there, I decided to take it one more step forward and use spray paint, masking around the edge, just like this. I moved on to painting the outer hexes in the same tones I used in my large stone walls. My thinking here was to make this a keep or a tower if I wasn't prepared and didn't have a large setup ahead of time. And while this paint scheme will ultimately use an airbrush, I had already decided to cheat on the dollar store, so what the heck, why not cheat again? If you really wanted to be true to the dollar store, then you easily could, however. And now, I'd like to thank all my amazing patrons, especially Michael and Natalie the Murphy Destroyer, for pledging at the shop foreman level. I'd also like to thank those of you who feel like I'm worthy of your subscription. It is my goal to really grow this channel, and it's all of you that are making it possible. So thank you as well. If there's a particular craft you'd like to see me take on sooner rather than later, then don't be afraid to leave it down below. And until next time, keep all your fantasy fantastic.